What about simple wills?
Yes.
One pages do-it-yourself wills.
You do-it-yourself wills. Yeah.
Do you have some thoughts about that?
Look, I think homemade wills have been very good in encouraging people to actually do a will. We've certainly seen more people doing wills because they can do it themselves. They don't have to go and see a lawyer that they view as scary and expensive, which is not true. But that's the perception often.
Yes.
The disadvantage is that often people don't get it right. And I've put on the slide there some of the examples that we've seen over the years of homemade wills where first they're just signed incorrectly. So they forget about the formalities and they've used different coloured pens, they haven't dated it, it's only got one witness. You'd be amazed. We've seen them on serviettes, envelopes, all kinds of things.
So do they have any weight?
There are. In some states there are curing provisions that can actually get around that absence of formality, but that is a very expensive and complicated process and not always successful.
The classic example I have is that a friend who's a lawyer, he reviewed his sister's will that she set up using a homemade will kit and looked at the will that they'd set up and said, well, what are your intentions? And she said, this is what they are. And he said, well, that's not what is written here. If you actually implement this, it's not what your intentions are. So that's the classic case, isn't it? Yeah,
it is. And the other one is ambiguous wording.
Okay.
As I've said there on the slide, people describe what you've just said. They describe something that they think is going to work, and it just is not going to work.
Yes.
People forget to dispose of all of their estate, so they give away the bank accounts and the shares, but forget about everything else.
Yes.
And it's amazing. Really is. Illegible handwriting. Yeah. If you can't read it, it can't be administered.
Yes.
And I've seen some terrible examples of handwritten wills. Unworkable conditions placed on gifts. I had one a number of years ago where beneficiaries were not to inherit if they were engaged in games of chance or taking illicit substances. Now, how does an executor determine whether those conditions are met or not?
Are they playing cards on a Saturday night or something?
Correct.
Yes.
How do they determine that? Well, they can't. And so that makes that gift very, very difficult to actually complete. And then people give away assets they don't own.
Yes.
That's a classic case of the life insurance case example I gave before, where the fella gave away his life insurance to a purpose, but he couldn't give it away because he didn't own it.
It was some other beneficiary.
Yeah, that's right. And it defeated the whole purpose. And the net result of that was the family home that he thought would be debt-free for his kids actually had a significant mortgage because the life insurance went to somebody else directly.
Wow.
Just a simple issue of getting it wrong.
Yes.
So I'm not saying that homemade wills are a disaster in every case. I'm not saying that at all. But extra care needs to be used when drafting something yourself. And if you go through the process, the data collection process, working out what you own and what you control, etc., if you've done it thoroughly, then the chances of getting it wrong are reduced, but there's still that scope to get it wrong.
Got a question that might be relevant at this point in time from Jim saying, can Andrew give some info on protecting a beneficiary's pension entitlements?
It's very difficult to protect age pension entitlements.
Yeah.
Because these days, or in the old days, pre-2000 or thereabouts, you could put it into a trust, and assets in a trust were not regarded as assets for Centrelink purposes. So, income test and assets test.
Yes.
That's all gone now, so you can't really use a trust.
There is one scenario, but it's a complex scenario where you hold insurance bonds within
the insurance bond
a trust.
Yeah, the sole purpose trust. Yeah, that's very complicated.
I've reviewed it a couple of times for clients, and whilst you practically could do it, it just caused so much complexity.
Yes.
That it was one of the principles that we talk about later is the KISS principle of keeping it simple. And it just fell over on those on about 3 clients that I've reviewed that strategy for. It hasn't worked. Yeah.
One way is to carefully review the precise financial circumstances of the potential beneficiary and structuring whatever benefit they're going to receive so it doesn't put them over the thresholds. So I've seen people do that. So I want to make provision for A or B.
Yes.
They're on a Centrelink pension. I don't want to disadvantage them by benefiting them, but
Yes.
I'd still like to leave them some provision. So you can structure around their particular financial circumstances at the time. That's okay if their circumstances remain the same, but if things change, that can be a problem. But Centrelink thresholds tend to grow, not shrink, and the value of money shrinks, not grows often.
Yes.
So you can probably structure it around those kinds of principles and get over the line in most cases. But using structures, difficult.
Yes.
Trust structures and the like.
Jim's question actually related very much to, there's two Jims, Jim B and Jim C. Jim C asked a similar question earlier on, which was, currently my wife and I are recipients of a Centrelink part pensions.
Yep.
If either of us dies, we will be excluded from the part age pension due to assets exceeding the single person upper limit.
Yes.
You know, what is the best way to handle this situation? Very similar to Jim B's
Yes.
question as well.
Yes.
And so one of the strategies could be that, say for example, you have $500,000 of assets that are going to pass on.
Yep. Yep.
You could, for the age pension for a homeowner, the threshold for assets is $265,000. So you could say, of that $500,000, I'll give $265,000 to my spouse.
Yep.
And the remaining amount, the difference between 265 and 500, will go to the children. Now that could actually enable them to continue to get the maximum age pension or part pension,
Yes.
depending on what it is. But the question then is, will they have sufficient assets then to live on after that?
Yeah, and it also comes down to, does their asset ownership structure enable them to do that? So they would need to make sure that they had assets in their individual names that they could actually carve out when one of them dies. If everything's owned jointly, everything's going to pass by survivorship. And in Jim C's example, they will lose the pension or lose the maximum pension potentially. So again, it's a review of how you own things. Split things in half. You know, if you've got a jointly held bank account or jointly held investments and you can split them without triggering CGT or stamp duty, consider doing that and then drafting a will that leaves part to the surviving spouse, part to the kids.
Yes.
But again, you need to make sure that your surviving widow or widower has sufficient financial capacity to live comfortably.
Yeah, because it's all very well to give it away to ensure that you get the maximum benefit, but if you don't have any assets to live on or you don't have the sufficient assets to move into an aged care facility,
Correct.
then the strategy's flawed.
Correct.
Yep. So you're potentially better off getting a smaller pension for a time than giving away all the assets and then struggling.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Excellent.